Well, Dave, I feel like we start every episode now with kind of the same discussions of how's quarantine life working out for you. So, I guess that's the only logical place to start here since this is the world we live in now.
Yeah, Jarrod, I mean, we're quarantine day 92,876. I don't even know which side is up. The sky may be blue or green or purple. At this point, who really knows? But no, quarantine life is quarantine life. I think I am getting ready to get over my minutes of Zoom calling at this point. Luckily, they don't charge like cell phones used to.
Yeah. So what's the I like to joke with you, Dave, that you and your wife Beth you guys sort of live your own version of quarantine is just like your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you could isolate like one thing thinking back to before this whole thing went down, what's the one thing that you kind of miss in your week or, day-to-day life that you can't do right now?
Oh yeah, so this is actually going to sound ridiculous for everyone that knows me, but I miss the people and the noise of the people, right? So before we would go out to coffee shops or libraries 3 or 4 times a week to get some work done, to drink someone else's caffeine, and to just enjoy the outside rest of the world. Sometimes you find ripping fast Wi-Fi, which is a bonus. And then the other thing that I didn't necessarily think I would miss, I miss digging out my steel-toed boots and hard hat and walking onto a manufacturing floor, trying to stay within those yellow lines so you don't get run over by a forklift operator, despite the fact that forklift operators certainly don't pay attention to those yellow lines.
That's right. That's right. It's kind of like when my dad taught me to be a driver. He's like, you can't be a defensive driver. You have to be an offensive driver. You have to anticipate that people are going to run into you.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely the way it is. But yeah, it's kind of the same for me. It's like, on the family side of things, just being able to go to the zoo or go to the park would be a game changer for us. But I think for me, like day to day, it's just like being able to go to Seeds Coffee, my favorite coffee shop here in Birmingham, or just being able to go to my office and not worry about my office mates infecting me. I'm kind of getting tired of my quarantine bunker at this.
I was going to say, we now have an eerily similar view to a previous shot of your quarantine bunker. If we can get the same shot of the quarantine bunker twice, we know that we've been in quarantine too long.
Yeah.
There are no other angles, no other sitting spots.
Yep, that's right. So to all you listening out there, I hope you're staying safe. Hope everybody's healthy. But maybe we can distract you for the next 20 minutes and talk about the new iPhone SE that was just released a week or so ago.
And last week we talked, and it was extremely exciting. I think I even said that I may consider acquiring an iPhone for the first time in maybe the entire line of iPhones that looked appealing. And I know that you've done some more thinking and talking to folks about it, Jarrod. So I'm interested to hear what you're thinking and how it compares to some, slightly older iPhones for industrial use cases.
Yeah, so I'm always sort of looking for and having these conversations with my customers and my friends that work in this space or just folks that work in enterprise IT. And so purchasing devices for your employees is just sort of like an ongoing process for every IT director or owner of a company, whether it's you onboarding a new employee, you're buying a new set of devices for your team, whatever the case may be, you're sort of always in that purchase cycle, unfortunately, especially if you're at a larger organization. And you're definitely getting the folks in the company, your fellow team members that are hounding you on when they're getting their upgrade.
Always.
So yes. So when this new SE came out, first of all, there's a lot of pretty amazing things that Apple did here. I mean, first of all, they have kept the same price as they had before, which is $399. So let's talk about the original iPhone SE. So if you remember back, the iPhone 6 came out, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus came out, and these were like the best-selling iPhones ever. There was a ton of pent-up demand. Folks had kind of, on the Android side of things, they'd moved to bigger screens, and it seemed that there were literally millions of people that were awaiting on a bigger screened iPhone. If you think back to this day, this is like when the iPhone had like a 4-inch screen, which is like a mini phone at this. And so Apple releases these phones, the 6, 6 Plus, 6S, and 6S Plus, literally were heads and shoulders above Apple's previous sales, like
Mhm.
combined. It was an insane success. So as they continued on increasing the size of the phones, there sort of became this gap there that Apple felt, and we're hearing from their customers of, well, we still like the smaller phones. So 5 years ago, they released the iPhone SE. So the iPhone SE was basically the iPhone 5 size phone, 4-inch screen, and they barely updated any of the internals, and they kept this $399 price. So from my perspective, when I'm advising my friends in the industry, my customers, like, this phone is like off the table. It's old, it's small. There's just a lot of things not great about it. The camera's not good. So a couple weeks ago, when they released this new iPhone, which has kind of been running through the rumor mill for a while, I was really shocked by a lot of things. So first off, this new device that's $400, it has the bigger. Basically, what they did was they took that iPhone 6 and 6S size, and as you know, if you have one of these devices, basically from the iPhone 6 to the iPhone 8, they didn't change anything about the physical device. So it's all the same chassis and look and feel. So they took that same size, so it's a 4.7-inch screen, but they put in the same chipset that is in the current iPhone 11. It's an A13 chip. So the performance is insane. They also included the same, so it only has one camera, but it has the main camera from the iPhone 11 in it. So the latest and greatest of the camera. And for a lot of people, this is a big deal. It kept the home button, so you still got that home button. So for the same price as the previous iPhone SE, and literally less than half the price of an iPhone 11, you get a really insanely fast phone with a great camera and pretty good battery life. So off the top, I mean, Dave, like this sort of blew my mind. I mean, what were your thoughts when you just saw like the spec sheet on?
So I saw the spec sheet, and being kind of a manufacturing nerd, I was reading some articles about it, and you kind of listed the internals that they had from other previous generations of iPhones, and the kind of overall information that I got is they did that basically to keep manufacturing costs low. They didn't want to have to
That's right.
recreate a bunch of parts. They wanted to be able to continue to use, the same expensive costs. So probably the same board, certainly the same case, the same screen, at least one of the same cameras. I mean, this is not to downplay a $400 phone. This is a parts, right? This is if someone is going to go through and they're piecing a phone together in 2020, it's like, hey, I can grab these pieces, I can put this together, and look, I can make money at the $400 price level. But I think it's the iPhone that people have been that people have been wanting. I mean, how many kids do you know who they want an iPhone? Are you really going to go buy a child $1,000? I don't own $1,000. The concept of buying $1,000 phone is insane. And
yep,
I think that goes along the lines of buying it for children. I think it goes along the lines of, if you're going to upgrade a whole bunch of the people who work in an industrial environment, if you're looking at $1,000 a phone, or even $500 or $600 after all the discount, like bulk discounts, it's a lot of money extrapolated out into the hundreds. But if you're looking at a $400 phone before discount, I think that it's a really good price point, and I think it's really appealing, and I think it's going to appeal to not just the people who had previously been purchasing the iPhone SE. And I know there are at least still a handful of those folks that I know out there who are like, I just want this normal, simple phone. This is the iPhone SE that can do basically anything that you're going to want a flagship or that you're going to want a phone to do in your pocket, especially if you're looking at upgrading it across the board and giving it to people as their take-home work phone. And honestly,
that's right.
And honestly, in this day and age, if people are into smartphones, if they're using their phone a lot, they probably own a device themselves for personal use outside of work.
So I agree. From an enterprise buyer's perspective, like, this phone really checks all the boxes. Like, it's a good price. The price is really almost impossible to beat. The lifetime of this device, like, you have to think this device is a 4 or 5 year device. I mean, it's got the latest chips in it, so it's going to run. We're on iOS 11 now, 12. Like it's going to go up to iOS 16 or 17. That's even weird to think about, but it's it's a device that's going to be kept up to date as far as software goes for the next 5 years at least. Apple's done a great job of supporting older devices. The camera's fantastic. So it really kind of checks all the boxes as far as if you're an enterprise buyer and you're looking for the devices you're going to put in your employees' hands. It's really kind of hard to beat this device. The second thing to think about is if one of these devices get lost or stolen or closed in a tailgate, like I've seen a couple of times, like you're not hurting that much. Like you're again, like Dave's saying, you're not replacing $1,000 iPhone 10R. Or whatever iPhone 11. You're replacing a $400 phone. And once you add the discount, the Apple Business discount on top of that, you're getting it for even less than. So we've said a lot of really good things about this device. I mean, there's really only two things, in my opinion, that are sort of like cons when it comes to looking at this device, things you may not be too excited about. The first thing is from a design standpoint, like Dave said, Apple under Tim Cook, who's sort of like this operational manufacturing genius, which like from a manufacturing standpoint, Apple sort of fascinates me. I love talking about Apple with my friends who work in manufacturing. And you talk about the scale and the precision that Apple builds things at. If you ever have a chance to talk to, like if you're in construction and you've never really talked to someone like this, find someone in manufacturing who actually builds things out of steel and talk to them about what Apple was able to do at the scale. And it's really sort of mind boggling. But anyway, the one of the detractors for me from like a design standpoint is like, this is basically an iPhone 6S that you're buying, and it has those big, massive bezels on it at the top and bottom of the screen. So we're going to talk a little bit about Android devices in the future, but it's like, if you're coming from, you or your team is coming from an Android device that has like the full screen look, like it's kind of hard to adapt to that, those big fat bezels at the top and bottom. So that's one thing to think about. The next one is something that my friend Dave here is very passionate about. So Dave, I'm gonna set a timer. You got 45 seconds to explain to me why it is such a human tragedy that this phone does not have a headphone jack. Go.
I mean, it is. I love the headphone jack. I think, jacked headphones are something that we all have and we all have lying around. I not only have one set that I'm currently using, I have a second set next to me just because they're always there and you can plug them in and you know that they work. At least for me, there have been more than one time where I've needed a set of headphones, I've needed to get on a call, I've needed to do something, and I go to turn on my Bluetooth headphones and they're dead. Or they get to some point and they go beep, beep, beep every 15 seconds until I literally cannot pay attention to the call that I'm having. It's an ease of use thing, the ability to just plug a physical device into another physical device and it works without having to worry that you need to charge all of those devices. There's just something nice and simplistic about you plugging it in and knowing that it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think obviously there's the price conscious side of that. Like not everybody's gonna get on board to buy AirPods, even though it seems like everyone has them now, like they are $150 Bluetooth headphones. But if you're in a crisis or maybe there's a pandemic going on and you can't get to a store, if you have a set of headphones laying around that you need to use, like, it's pretty much like compatible with any set of headphones you can get. So there is a little bit of common sense there that comes along. So those are the two sort of cons that I see when it comes to those devices. So we don't want to just focus totally on Apple stuff. And just FYI, like we do talk a lot about Apple stuff, but from our experience in this space, like it seems like Apple has pretty much, when it comes to mobile devices, they've pretty much like cornered the market here. So that's kind of why we focus a lot on what they're doing and the impact that has on this space. So let's talk a little bit, Dave. Could you talk a little bit about on the Android and what kind of Google offers folks in this sort of price range?
I'm an Android purist, I suppose one could say. The last 4 phones that I've owned have come from Google and have had the closest to stock iteration of Android running on them as humanly possible. So Google has the Pixel line that has come out, which has replaced their Nexus line, which is and the Pixel line is very much, at least in theory, a competitor to the iPhone in the Google ecosystem. And so, if you're going to go on the Android side, I would certainly suggest looking at the Pixels, and kind of similar to what Apple has done with these SEs. Google and the Pixels have come out with the A lineup. So they have the 3A and the 3A XL, and recently the 4A and the 4A XL. I think I made a joke on the previous podcast as to how Google has taken after Apple's naming structure and just thrown a whole bunch of numbers and letters next to this stuff. I mean, the only thing we need is a Max after one of these, and we won't be able to tell if we're talking about an old iPhone or a new Pixel. But no, so the Pixel lineup is very similar to the iPhone lineup, and the A lineup of the Pixels are basically equivalent to what we've been talking about of the iPhone SE. Kind of specs wise, it's basically a toss up as to it. Let me phrase. It is a toss up in the way that it's going to do what you need it to do for 2 to 5 years, depending upon what your personal upgrade cycle is, or until you drop it in the bed of a tailgate and you crunch it and then you have to go hope that you're paying
Right.
your device insurance on it. It's nice because it's that stock, it just works. And at that $300, $400-ish starting point, you can get a Google phone that has similar to the SE. It's actually got pretty chunky bezels. I actually don't necessarily mind the bezels. I feel like I've grown up with the bezels, and it's kind of a throwback to everything. I think I prefer the bezels over the notch. I do not like the notch iteration that we're currently in. But no, it's kind of got chunky. It's kind of got chunky bezels. It's got a pretty good OLED screen. It's got a headphone jack. It's got USB-C charging. It doesn't necessarily have all the bells and whistles, similar to how the iPhone SE doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the new iPhone 11s or 12s that are coming out. I would honestly say that spec-wise, the 3 and 4A lineup are significantly closer to the flagship 3 and 4 XLs than the new iPhone SE is. The major difference is basically the camera and internal memory. But if you're getting to the point of being like 64 gigabytes of internal memory isn't enough for me, then you're probably looking at spending a bunch of money on a flagship anyway.
Yeah. One of the main differences I see, I agree with you. I think the three line of Pixels may have some better features and specs than the iPhone SE.
Mm-hmm.
The one sticking point for folks may be the screen size. So it looks
Mm-hmm.
like the smaller Pixel 3a has a 5.6 inch screen. And it does have, in my opinion, the bezels are smaller. They move the button to the back, so your fingerprint sensor is on the back of the phone. So it does.
They've always been on the back
makes
of the phone.
Yeah, so that allows the bezels to be a little bit smaller. But yeah, so that's something to look at on the Android side of things. They've got a lot of good options there. And from my experience on Android and what I've seen, the Samsung devices are nice, but the Google devices have really kind of taken the jump forward, I think, in my opinion, these last few iterations. So the one other comparison that I would like to consider here also is when you're looking at the SE, the next sort of jump up in price is the iPhone XR. So Dave joked about me having a pocket full of XRs the last time we hung out in New Orleans.
Because you did.
Yeah, I did. But the XR was a sort of compared to the A line of when the iPhone XS came out. They came out with this XR device, which didn't have the OLED screen and had some different tweaks, but was a really strong device. So I think the one thing to consider on the XR is it's $200 more, but it has a bigger screen. So it's got the 6.1 inch screen. It has Face ID, which is really nice, and that sort of gesture-based navigation that you get on the newer iPhones. So if you're used to that, it's going to be hard to switch back to the SE. But the bigger thing is the battery life on the 10R is insane. Like it is almost a 2-day battery. In my experience from using it, even after having the device for a year, the battery life was just crazy. So if, your team is a remote team, maybe they're out in the field a lot, they're really working hard on these devices, that this could be a good device to consider. It's a little bit more expensive. Repair costs are going to be more expensive. The repair costs on these, the 10 line of phones is considerably more. But their batteries are better. They're all around pretty durable phones. So that's something that I think is worth considering. Another thing to consider on all these devices on the iOS side is the smaller phones are way less popular than the bigger phones. So everyone that's building software for these devices, including Apple, sort of the last thing they do before they ship it is check it on these small phones and maybe make a few tweaks. And I'm saying this from experience. So there are pieces of iOS or especially apps that you use that are simply going to feel a little bit squished or may not function 100% correctly because you're on the smallest possible device. It's going to be a little bit better on this device than the previous SE because the previous SE was so tiny. But that's another thing to keep in mind if you're going to adopt this device. Not a deal breaker, just something. So I think that kind of covers everything. I'm definitely interested to hear from you guys on what your thoughts are, what else you'd like to hear from us, if you'd like to for us to do an episode on MDM or sort of the relationship with Apple and Google that you can establish on the enterprise side and the best way to navigate all that, and any sort of like device management type stuff, Apple Business Manager, all that. So we'd love to hear y'all's feedback on that. Dave, do you have any more thoughts before we jump into our recommendations?
First, I'm just going to throw one thing into the mix. I have been hearing rumors of a baseline iPhone 12 coming out in the $600 or $650 range. And if Apple is going to move the baseline off of that $999, I think that could provide a third really good option in there. I think that at this point, in the next 3 months, if you're looking to purchase, you can't go wrong. If you're looking to buy, phones at scale for your industrial company, I don't think that you can go wrong. Outside of that, when we talk about Apple versus Android, I think you have to look at what you get with the whole package, especially in an enterprise situation. So with Apple, you get those things like the end-to-end encryption. You get more security baked in. It's part of the overall ecosystem. So if you've got iPhones and iPads, maybe you're working on MacBooks, it just works. Like I cannot overemphasize how nice the fact is that it just works. Like Jarrod's iPods that he's got on, like he can go from his computer to his tablet to his iPhone, and he can swap between all of those at least virtually seamlessly. And again, I cannot, coming from someone that has an Android phone, I cannot say how much the seamless integration, I cannot say how beneficial the seamless integration is when it goes with all that. So before we do recommendations, Jarrod, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm sure you're not prepared for this whatsoever. It's the beginning of May. So let's say at the end of May, you had to make a decision for your enterprise company that needs to buy 500 iPhones to send out to the service folks in the field, or to send out into the field. Which way are you going?
Oh man. I think my considerations would definitely be between the 10R and the SE. Those higher end phones are just out of the picture for me. And from a workflow standpoint, the Google phones would also be an out for us. So, at that point, I think that both of these phones are kind of a toss up. So depending on what the budget would be, I would try to lean towards the 10R because I really do think it's a better phone. It's a more modern phone. It's gonna, that little bit extra screen real estate will really make the difference for my team in the field. So I think that's probably where I would land on this. Is I would go with the 10R and feel confident in that, knowing that the battery's going to last longer, the life of the battery is better. It's got a newer screen that's better. and I'm willing to take that risk that I might have some repair costs that creep up on me or some replacement costs that creep up on me. But overall, my team's going to be happier on that device than on the SE.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'm super excited about the SE, what it's going to mean for the Apple ecosystem. But if you're already bought into the ecosystem and you're going to work from it, the additional $100 a piece, I mean, you can save $100 in man hours exceptionally quickly by giving people a slightly nicer phone. And then it's something that you're going to have for a while. And, maybe when the 12s come out, if they do come out in the, lower price range, you look at giving, your leads or your executives, something like that, some of these slightly nicer, larger, more modern phones as well.
Yep. That sounds good. All right, so that wraps that up. Let's move on into the recommendation section. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I go every time first. So this week, Dave, why don't you give us your recommendation for the week?
Cool. Yeah. So I actually have two recommendations. Being in quarantine and remembering that we have a Disney Plus membership has caused us to go through and scroll through and find some of those old Disney movies, including at least a handful that I didn't necessarily realize were Disney movies. So I'll give you guys one of my favorite recently refound movies that is a Disney movie from 1960, The Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it was great. I distinctly remember watching it until we basically burned the VHS tape out growing up. And so Beth and I were sitting down last night watching it for the first time. And at some point she looks at me and she's like, how many times did you watch this? How much of your life did this movie help to reflect on? And I'm like, well, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm going to tell Jarrod tomorrow. If I tell him I found the perfect tree that I'm building a house in, we know that I've probably completely lost it. So on the movie side, I'm going to recommend for all the Disney Plus subscribers, The Swiss Family Robinson. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And then on the podcast side, I'm going to go and shout out another ridiculous podcast that I listen to. So if you guys have listened to all 40,000 hours of the Adventure Zone that I shouted out last week, you guys should go check out Small Town Murder. And so
nice.
It's a comedy podcast, and it's from these two comedians named Jimmy and James. They're both in the Phoenix, Arizona area, although originally they come from the East Coast. And Beth and I absolutely love it because these things are generally about 2 hours long, and for the first 30 to 45 minutes they just make fun of all of these small towns. We don't really set up any plot devices. That there is a point in which we talk the real estate report, and the guy goes online and just craps all over all of these ridiculously small towns. And they do make a lot of jokes, almost never at the expense of the person that has unfortunately been murdered. But it's very funny. It's a lot of fun. We generally like it, and honestly and unfortunately, Jarrod, we have been to too many of the towns that are
Oh really? Wow, that's awesome.
Oh yeah. So here, hold on. I'm gonna pause this for a second. I got to here we go. Okay. And so if anyone is looking for a podcast to start at, I'm going to recommend number 117. It's called Sexier Than Coal in Jasper, Alabama. And for anyone that doesn't, do you know where Jasper is, Jarrod?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah. So Jasper is actually just down the road from where we stayed when we were in Alabama in January or early February, right on Smith Lake. Yeah, we drove through it, and then we were we spend way too much time in these small towns. There's also one that makes Tiger King look exceptionally tame. But I'm gonna let you guys. Figure that one out. Jarrod, now that I've given everyone thousands of hours of listening to during quarantine, what are your recommendations for this week?
Yeah, so check the show notes or the episode, and we'll have links to all the stuff we're recommending. So I love your Swiss Family Robinson recommendation as a Disney family on our end. So I'll also give you an old school. I've been like me and Molly have been surprised by how much our kids love like the super old like 60s and 70s
Mm-hmm.
Disney or just old movies in general. Like our daughter Rin, who's 7, she loves like the old version of Annie,
Mm-hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
like is totally addicted to it. So we have also been going through the back catalog on Disney Plus. And last week we watched The Parent Trap from 1961,
So good.
and it is just like it's so good. Like that, the dad. I mean, everything about it is great, but
Mhm.
the dad's house in like the early 60s, he's got this like mid-century modern house that's set in like New Mexico somewhere,
Mhm.
so it's like got those like open courtyard feels, but it's literally like, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright's dream or whatever. It's just this amazing house. It's worth watching the movie just to see the house and people smoking everywhere, you know. So yeah, that's one recommendation, Parent Trap on Disney Plus. The second recommendation I have is one of my favorite books that has been released over the past couple years. It's called American Kingpin.
Mhm.
The subtitle is The Epic Hunt for the Criminal Mastermind Behind the Silk Road. So it's a book by Nick Bilton, who is a tech writer that I'd followed for years. He worked for the New York Times, and I think he's at GQ or somewhere now, somewhere at Vanity Fair. Now he works for Vanity Fair. But he wrote this. I mean, it reads like a fiction novel,
Mhm.
but it's like basically, you know, a nonfiction book on the guy who founded the Silk Road, which was
Mhm.
basically a website on the dark web where you could buy drugs and weapons and all kind of stuff. So it's the story of the guy who created the Silk Road, and then all of the sort of federal government investigators that were hunting him down and finding him, all sort of culminating his capture in San Francisco. But just a fantastic read. I mean, it's one of those books that you can rip through in a couple of nights, or the audiobook is fantastic also. So yeah, that's my recommendation, American.
Yeah,
Um,
that was fantastic. I remember following the story, and it read like fiction, right?
yeah,
It's like this
it's
can't
wild.
be true, and then it gets to the point of how did this guy get caught? Like he was set up in such a way. It's like how did anyone possibly get caught during this? And so, but no,
Yeah,
it's a fantastic book. I would certainly suggest the read.
yeah, and I won't spoil how it all went down, but of all the federal agencies that were responsible for tracking this guy down, FBI, you know, NSA, all of them, the guy that found it was working for an agency that you would not expect to be able to track this guy down. But it's just like it's an amazing story and really an incredible read. So in the times when we have a little bit more downtime to read, I would definitely recommend American Pen. And I have to believe that some movie studio is working a movie version of this. Like it's just such an incredible.
I feel like I heard they were. Yep. No,
Yep.
perfect.
All right. Awesome. Well, Dave, it's been great to catch up with you, and I guess we'll talk in a couple weeks.
Yep, you as well, Jarrod. It was good talking to everyone. As Jarrod said, please drop us some comments. What else you would like to hear on future Tradesmen, either in the Apple and app ecosystem, mobile solutions, or just kind of anything in general. Yeah, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
All right. See you.
Yep, bye bye.